I know I'm being followed by the Minister, but one thing I will say, just on that at a personal level, I could quite safely say that had it not have been for the type of relationship that Ngata had with Te Puia, then perhaps Te Puia wouldn't have had so much optimism about where education could take our people, because just as she was anti-conscription, she wasn't all that fond of the public education system of the day, you know. And that relationship that she had with Ngata after that period, you would quite be able to track how she then started to ingest opportunities through education of key people that she started supporting. So on that relationship, you will never ever hear me call for this minister to stand down from her portfolio. Why? Because I think every other minister prior to her has made a hatch of it, and I'd rather have a Māori sitting there, even if we did it, well, I better qualify that in case there's reporters in the room. I would rather have a Māori Minister of Education for the nature of the change that we have to get for the next probably 10 years, because we need a different perspective. Now, both her and my challenge is that we're both governed by our mainstream politics. So we have to convince mainstream that the value proposition of having a more educated Māori and Pacific population will, in the long term, be better for the country. And that's a challenge for us in our own right. But having her there at least provides an opportunity to bring a different whakaaro into the debate that happens around her cabinet table. So I think we have to recognise that. I'll debate the issues, but I still believe that we need to be in the key portfolios. Save the day, we have a Māori Minister of Finance, and Māori Prime Minister. We can do the whole thing. That's changing the norm. But anyway, coming back to then the issues of the day, and where I think some of the real rubs are for us. National standards, I think, is an inadequate measure. And where I'm concerned about the debate right now is that, yes, we can preserve Māori education by not being subject to the same measurements and things like that, but that's a limited debate that will have a limited outcome when we know at the end of the day the majority of our kids are in mainstream. So we have to think about that debate in a way, I expect pushback on this, we have to think about that debate in a way where we are not supporting a blunt measure, which doesn't give a true picture of what the value add in learning for our children is, and also the rate of learning progression. Because I think you all know in your own respective areas that learning progression can be quite sharp, especially if you're thinking about the number of our kids that start school without any early childhood grounding. Then they get to school, and then you can track, you know, from the point at which you get them to the times at which you measure how fast they've, you know, progressed, and that's success, surely. Even if it's not achieved, it is success. So we've got to. My concern about national standards is, one, it's a blunt measure, two, it's not broad enough. It doesn't take into account the issues of coming into school without any childhood education, and it doesn't take in the value-added measure of culture and identity and how that can fundamentally make a difference. I have my own personal thing. My son's only 2.5, but you know, between 6 and 8, I'd just be happy if he waked up every morning saying, "Hey, I'm going to school." At the moment, he thinks he has choice. And he stays at home. Like this morning, I was watching around, he stays in bed and says, "I'm not going to go home today, Mama." I said, "Oh, yes, you are. Get changed, you're going." You know, so from 6 to 8, I just hope that our kids are happy, you know, and go to school and want to learn and that kind of thing. Measuring our kids at that stage is useful, but only for a measure. The greatest use is to track their learning progression and then to adjust and respond to what their needs are as individuals. The other, on the back of national standards, if the government goes down the avenue of having league tables, again, I'm concerned, because you already know many of your schools, middle-class families already make the decision based on their perception of what a good school looks like. And on Monday I was in Maryvale, and Tauranga, and they all told me stories about how their middle class flight happened and what happened to their school as a result. But I tell you what, that school is a primary school and it's doing really good things against the perception of the broader community there. And I suspect many of you are in that place. So we don't need league tables to rank our primary schools on the back of national standards. You know, that's already happening. What we need is a transformation in mainstream generally to change the norm. You know, and change the expectation and be able to actually measure the value add that they gain. It's a bit like the Wānanga. What's good for Māori is good for everybody. But that they gain by responding to diversity better. Then the other thing is there's no educational solution exists in a vacuum. You all work so hard to do what you do. But many of the responses outside of the school gate are fundamental if we want to get the type of shift that we expect we should be getting. And I am concerned when it seems that the general perception is to beat up on teachers because you're not doing enough. You can only do what you can do. You know, and as leaders, as principals and leaders in the sector, you can only do what you can do. What happens once your child leaves the school gates? And I'm pretty sure that you're doing more than what you should do. And that's because you're not getting the type of support that would have a more of a community-oriented solution. And that's what I spoke about earlier. I think that's probably the direction. We have to think about cross-cutting measures outside of the school gate that can improve opportunities, educational opportunities for our young people. So, you know, I'm hoping I'm aiding digestion here. A few whakaaro. I do want a couple of questions. I know where I'm pitching things. Lastly, if we come back to the one thing I wanted to say about where I see educational leadership. This is a fertile space for you as educational leaders and as principals. And again, my focus is on English mainstream, because I think by and large Māori mainstream leading direction and thinking, the intelligence that could come from that sector would be in the evaluation and assessment frameworks that could transpose across. I think that is new and fertile ground for the sector. But in English mainstream, as educational leaders, wouldn't it be great if some of those schools were required to do some kind of professional development or secondment into communities that they generally try and migrate out of? Interesting, because I've heard a lot of principals say that actually, Māori principals say that their observation is that the reward for a good teacher going into principalship is to migrate to a higher decile school. I thought that was an interesting comment because I never thought about it. Maybe you know all the intricacies of that comment. I thought, oh gee, that's interesting. So you meant to say many high decile or mid-decile, high decile teachers and principals don't want to have anything to do with lower decile schools? I don't know, it just raised a question in my head. But I think it's about perspective and gaining perspective, and if we want to shift the norm, we've got to be in a position where we are requiring a perspective and a new way of doing things. You know, I used to hate it when I used to be the member for Te Tai Hauauru some years ago and visit schools in smaller communities. They'll remain nameless because you probably head departments of some of those schools in this room here. What used to really make me frustrated is this real strong feeling that the educational leadership in the school was in a retiring mode rather than a kind of horizon, sunrise mode. And our kids need to be kind of inspired to look to the horizon, because that's how we are as a people, that's how our ancestors thought. We were voyagers and travellers. We were explorers and adventurers. So that horizon kind of mentality and teaching is really captivating for a lot of our kids here. The educational leadership of the school was kind of in sunset mode. I thought, oh geez, I feel sorry for the kids here, you know. They're going to be the ones that are simply streamed off to the lower class, or to the trades things, and not kind of lifting their potential in broader areas and things like this. Not that I'm begging the trades, but that's old thinking that we don't that all Māoris want to be in the trade sector. We want to be across everything. So I think in terms of educational leadership and where your group can add value to shifting the norm, is much in the same way as kind of some of the findings of Russell Bishop's study tells us about what counts for good teachers. Well, I think, surely from within this body, the emerging thought should be what counts as good educational leadership in our English mainstream schools, and what can you offer as a professional leadership group to that conversation with this minister and with all successive ministers. So there's a few thoughts that I've had, and I wanted to kind of offer you kind of more of a directional conversation about where my thinking is going. I've got thoughts on a whole lot of other things that I'm happy to talk about, but invite me to the school. I'd be only too pleased to accept the invitation. I'm encouraged by the capacity with which you continue to network as a sector and as a profession. In general, I think educational leadership has to come from the profession and not policy or politicians. Why? Because we have to ensure that the theory follows the practice, not the other way around, which is if it was, theory leading practice, then you'd be only responsible for the types of ill-founded education policies that come out of a very limited pool of knowledge within politics. It is limited because it's defined largely by politics, not by evidence, not by good practice and effective practice. So my one kind of last message is really about direction and how the profession must hold on to that. If the review of the Teachers' Council, for example, goes down a road which leads it only to be a regulatory body for the sector, then I think that there should be alarm bells ringing. I would push back on that. I don't think that the Teachers' Council, as your professional body, should be just a regulatory body. It should be about professional leadership as it is now, and it should retain that strong leaning, and that the high trust model and collaborative model that we have in schools is absolutely important and a core foundation of why New Zealand has a fantastic education system, as well as elements of our self-managing model. Nō reira, I raru I rā o ngā pitupitu whakaro ka waihotia, mā koutou he whakarohia, and no, he whakakata pia, pio ia nō ka te mea whakamutu ngā māku ka tino mihi atu rā ki a koutou ko katoa ki nei wahanga māku. Kia ora kei te katoa. Take questions if you have any. If you haven't, he reckons I've got 3 minutes anyway. So, kia ora kei te katoa. You must have given everything right tonight. Must be said that questions will get them. Kia ora, thank you.